burned the pole. Slid all the way down the pole. You know, it's more embarrassing than it is painful most times when that happens, but that time it was more painful. I don't know what happened. I slid down, and I don't know, maybe my belt was loose, I don't know, but before I hit the ground, a free fall, I turned inside out, upside down in my harness, and I was hanging upside down just a foot from the ground, and I'd broken my leg and broken my knee and sprained that same ankle, and well, that was that. There was no service for me. I still feel the sprained ankle. That's only just a sprain, but it's still there. There was no service for me, and I was laid up for the better part of a year.
Can we go back a bit? And you were telling me about Andrew Young and his plan to quiet things down.
Yeah, well, when that assault in which I participated in Plaza de la Constitución, when that happened, that heated things up as bad as they had ever been, and Dr. King came right down here to St. Augustine 2 days later. He was with one of his two right-hand men, Abernathy and Young. They were the two first lieutenants. And he and Abernathy, they went to the Monson Motor Lodge to have lunch. And they were met there at the front door by the management, the ownership, whatever. And they were denied entry. Well, they just want to go and have lunch. No, you're not coming in here. And when they wouldn't leave, the law was called, as the law always was called, and they arrested Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., who had traveled all over the state of Florida, but only in the city of St. Augustine was he arrested and thrown in jail. It was during that, I think it was during the incarceration that he'd been to St. Augustine before. He'd been there a couple of months before that, and he preached. I think he might have preached at St. Paul AME Church. Not exactly sure. He preached in St. Augustine, and he gave a talk here. I think it was in maybe February of that same year. The house where he was staying in, it was shot up. But anyway, he came back here and he got thrown in jail the only place in Florida, and he wrote to his friend from jail, Rabbi Israel Dresner, his good friend, who was a rabbi up in Springfield, New Jersey, where Dr. King had spoken. He spoke there in 1963, and subsequent to all of this in 1966. They were pals. They knew each other. I don't know. Maybe they went to the university together. They were friends. And anyway, Dr. King wrote to his buddy, Israel Dresner, Rabbi Dresner. He said, why don't you get some of your rabbi friends and come on down here, join the party. I'm sure he didn't say it that way, but doggone if Rabbi Dresner didn't do just exactly that. He got 15 other rabbis. And the 16 of them come down here. There was one guy who wasn't a rabbi, but the 16 rabbis, they came down here to protest, and they did their demonstrating over there outside the Monson Motor Lodge, and all 16 of them were arrested and thrown in jail in the biggest mass arrest of Jewish rabbis in all of American history. Israel Dresner, he's still going strong today. He's in his 80s now, and he's always out there in the forefront of all of the fights for justice and social justice. He's still that same man. Anyway, they threw him all in jail, and that went all over the papers. He lays claim to the title to being the most arrested Jewish rabbi in all of history. Rabbi Israel Dresner.
But that's not all that happened at the Monson Motor Lodge, was it?
No. There were protesters, white protesters, who come to say, protesters were coming from all over the place to protest here in St. Augustine. And they came here, you had to stay somewhere, so they were staying in the same Monson Motor Lodge. The white ones were. The black ones couldn't stay there. They couldn't even go to the lunch counter. But the white protesters were staying there, and it was a hot day, a lot of hot days in St. Augustine, and they're frolicking in the pool, and they said, let's get a hold of our black African-American protesting friends and invite them over to swim in the pool with us. And they asked them to come over. They came over. They're all splashing around in the pool. And folks just went nuts, you know. Blacks and whites. Of course, they didn't say black. You can use your own imagination. I won't say it. But blacks and whites in the same pool. We can't have that. This is crazy. This is, you know, not everybody thought that. I'm sure there were some who didn't feel like that. But, you know, the management, Brock his name was, the owner, I'm not sure if he was the manager or the owner or both, he came out and he said, "Get out of the pool! Get out of the pool!" And they wouldn't get out of the pool. It was a hot day. Splashing in the pool, it feels good. "I'll get you out of my pool." And he goes and he gets a gallon of muriatic acid or hydrochloric acid, I'm not sure which one it was, and he walked around the pool and he poured it all into the pool. "There, this will get you. Get out. This here is acid. Now get out of the pool." They didn't get out of the pool. There were those there that knew muriatic acid is just what they used to clean pools. You had a gallon of it, 12,000 gallons of water. That's not going to do anything. And they just kept swimming and having a good old time. So what happens next? The law, of course, is called. And there was this one cop. He took his shoes off and he put them there at the side of the pool. And he jumped in fully clothed, and the rest of the pool and the media, the newspaper, the press was there, and they were standing. And they got a picture of this cop jumping into the pool to make arrest. And that picture just sailed all around the world. It got into the Russian newspapers. This is at the height of the Cold War, if you understand. And there's a picture of the police jumping in to arrest people for swimming together in the pool with a caption that this is what goes on in the United States of America. Oh boy, and that I want to tell you, that gave St. Augustine a black eye. No pun intended. Boy.
And did you know where Maggie was during all
Well, yeah,
this?
she was in it. She was in it up to her chin, literally in the pool, and figuratively everywhere else. She was doing all that she could. Yeah, yeah.
Monson's gone now, isn't it?
Yeah, the Monson's gone, but there's a couple of plaques over there. There's one there where the new pool is for the Hilton. It says the Monson Lodge, Motor Lodge, what it was called there, was the focal point of all of the demonstrations that took place in St. Augustine during the Civil Rights Movement led by Dr. Martin Luther King and Dr. Robert Hale. It's there. There's another plaque there where he was arrested, and you can go stand on those steps and read, this is where Dr. King was arrested. Yeah, it's gone now, but that plaque was there. Yeah.
And Jackie Robinson came to St. Augustine too.
He
the
sure
first
did.
black man to play in the major leagues.
He went to the AME. We got an AME church here in St. Augustine. We did then. We still got it now at St. Paul, AME. And Jackie Robinson came to that church, and he talked that night to about 100 people, telling them that they shouldn't give up the fight, to stay strong. We're this close. We're going to make it. Don't give up. Keep strong. You see, it was dream fever. It was so hot. It was getting so hot. Guns were being shot, and hospitals were being filled, and jails were filled with people, and churches were in the midst of it, you know. And like I said about that 100 years, Florida, the worst. Yeah, it was hot. It was hot.
Did anything happen at your church?
Yeah, my church, First Methodist. That's when a fellow named Peter Bancroft, he came to church one Sunday with 3 African Americans. They wanted to go in and worship. And of course they wouldn't let him in the church. It's crazy. It's hard to believe you couldn't go into a church if you weren't white, unless it was a black church. You couldn't go in. It was against the law. And I don't know who was out there barring the entry, but the cops were called. And they were arrested and charged. Charged with what? Wanting to shout hallelujah? Want to sing songs off key? What is it that they did? I'll tell you what it is. I have it right here. They were charged. They were charged with malicious intent, trespassing, breach of peace, and conspiracy. For just wanting to go in and say a prayer here or there. Listen to the word of God. Breach of peace, conspiracy. Maggie, I was told, saw it all. She was there. Finally, just a couple weeks later, on June 12th, 1964, Lyndon Johnson, who is now the president, he signed the good old boy, remember, the Southerner, the Texan. He signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
But even that didn't solve all the problems, did it?
Not by a jugful of stones. Demonstrations continued, and King spoke about having a target on his back, about all the death threats that he received, and he received a lot of them. When JFK was assassinated, King said to his wife, Mrs. King, Coretta King, he said to her, I got it right here, he said, "This is what is going to happen to me also. I keep telling you, this is a sick society." And then it happened.
Yes, he was in Memphis.
That's right, Miss
Memphis, Tennessee.
He'd been in Memphis before. He'd been there in February, months before, when he came to support black sanitation workers who were on strike. What were they striking for? They were striking for equal treatment. Here's what the story was. That when the weather was bad, and the white sanitation workers couldn't get to work because the weather was bad, they got paid just the same. But on the same day, the same weather that was keeping workers from doing the same work, except that they were the black workers, they had their pay docked. Huh? And so that's when King came and he stood with the sanitation workers in Memphis. Anyway, he'd been here before, and he was there to stand with them. And he was delayed getting to Memphis. He was coming to Memphis to give a talk to the world gathering, or the world headquarters of the Church of Christ. The meeting was happening in Memphis, and his plane was delayed because of a bomb threat. Everywhere he went, there were bomb threats. But when he got there, he gave, some folks say, the best speech of his life, when he gave the "I've been to the mountaintop" address. I've got parts of it here. He said, "But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord."
You're right. It was a wonderful speech.
Yeah.
Mr. Lee, what are all those notebooks and papers you have in front of you?
Oh, it's nothing. I've been writing things down for 50 years. I've got more notes than I know what to do with. I can't write too many now because my eyes are so bad, but like I told you, the doc said I'm going to be fine. I got all these notes. I wanted to write a book. I was going to call it Dream Fever, or Maggie's Dream, and I wanted to dedicate it to her and in memory of Dr. King, but my eyes, they're bad, and my syntax and my grammar, they ain't so good, if you know what I mean. I'm not a writer, but that's why I asked if I might be one of the ones who could tell what happened in his time. Anyway.
Mr. Lee, Mike and Chuck would like to take a break here.
Oh,
Is
no,
that all right?
I'm sorry, Mike and Chuck, let's continue this going. Miss Towns, there's folks down at the Poland place down there. They know we're doing this interview, and they're anxious to me to get down there, and I want to get down there and tell them how it went. So
All right,
let's
okay.
press on.
All right, so it was April 15th, 1968.
Yeah.
And Dr. King was in Memphis.
Yes, he was staying at the Lorraine Motel. He was in room 306. His room there was being shared with Mr. Abernathy, and it was kind of the meeting place for all the central figures there, and they were meeting there in 306 at the Lorraine Motel, and at about 6 o'clock, he went out on the balcony, Dr. King did. He went out on the balcony, and he was leaning over the balcony, and he was talking to folks. They were coming and going in and out of the parking lot. He was checking to see who was leaving and who was showing up. And Jesse Jackson was down there in the parking lot. He was walking with a man, and Jesse Jackson hollered up to Dr. King saying something like, "Look who's with me, it's Ben Branch. You remember Ben?" Now, Ben Branch, he was a saxophone player, and he was the leader of the music that night that would take place at the meeting that was going to happen. And he said, "Look who's here with me, Ben Branch. You remember Ben?" And Dr. King, he spoke the last words he'd ever speak. He leaned over and he said, "Oh yes, Ben, he's my man. Make sure tonight at the meeting you play Precious Lord, Take My Hand. Play it real pretty." You know that old hymn, Miss Tompkins?
Yes, I do. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, mine too. Me and Maggie, we sang it that first morning that we went to church together after Hojo's on our 17th birthday. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand, I am tired, I am weak, I am worn, through the storm, through the night, lead me on to that light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
That was just beautiful. And you've got me choking up a bit too.
Yeah, me too. You know, I get that earworm thing going. I'm either whistling or humming or singing that Precious Lord, Take My Hand just about, 5 days a week, I guess. You know.
So that hymn was the last thing about which Dr. King spoke.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. At 6:01, a single shot from a Remington Game Master 760-30-06. Bullet ended his right cheek about here and it went through his throat and it busted up a couple of vertebrae and it knocked his necktie right off the front of his shirt and cut through the jugular and some other vessels. Came to stop in his left shoulder about here. And he was on the floor of that balcony and a pool of blood, and Abernathy heard the shot. He'd come running out and some others came running out and they all gathered around. I know Andrew Young said he thought Dr. King was dead right then, but somebody said, "No, he's got a pulse, he's got a pulse, he's alive." And they got him to the hospital, St. Joseph's, and they opened up his chest, CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Was tried, but to no avail. And at 7:05, he was pronounced dead.
James Earl Ray.
Yeah, Ray. They saw him running from a boarding house or a rooming house across the way, and they lit out after him, but he gave them a run for their money. It took them 2 months. But they got him. They caught him at Heathrow Airport in London. And they arrested him, went to trial, got convicted, thrown in jail. A lot of folks don't remember this, but he escaped from jail and was on the lam for a few days after that. And then they caught him and threw him back in.
Some folks think that Ray didn't act alone. They think there was a conspiracy. What do you think?
Well, I think that if somebody bought him the gun or got him a plane ticket or a vehicle or something like that, chances are they're long gone now. That was 44 years ago, but was there a conspiracy? Hell yes, there was a conspiracy. And if I'm honest, I have to say that I was part of it. I mean, there was a conspiracy in that there was a mood, an atmosphere, a feeling that would tolerate such a behavior and would celebrate the event when Dr. King was assassinated. There were millions of people who were part of the conspiracy that created that atmosphere of violence, where it was, and I was, yes, there was, and I was a part of it.
were when
Yeah.
you heard?
Yeah, I'll never forget. I was over on the island. I was coming across the Bridge of Lions. I was just about to come down to San Marco Avenue. It was well after midnight. I don't know. I'd been out with my buddies, and I heard on the radio that he was dead. And I pulled over on San Marco, and I remember just holding on to the wheel at 10 and 2 and shaking. Maggie, 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 I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I felt so bad for Maggie. I knew